A brave group of Argentine women, grandmothers and mothers of disappeared prisoners, began to demonstrate in the central square of Buenos Aires. Protests against human rights violations were dangerous, and some of the women were arrested and themselves disappeared. After an entire year in prison with no news, Marissa learned that Patrick was safe with his grandparents.
Well, first of all, we had to go through this big, thick door. And when we got inside, there was like these numbers, and the guard told you where to go. So then the place was just a big hallway, long, not very long though. And it wasn't very wide. And it was chairs, you know, round ones, not big. And you have to talk to your parent or son or, you know, through a microphone. And then this guard came up and said, all the kids go inside and leave now. And this woman policeman, she just took us out, you know. She just told us this way and out.
The protests continued with greater intensity. Every Thursday, the mothers marched, demanding news of their children and an end to the disappearances. The mothers marched, and the world was watching. Gradually, the protests in Argentina and abroad began to have an effect.
Después de 5 largos años,
after 5 long years, my wife was expelled from the country. She went straight from Villa de Robo prison to Ezeiza airport, where she was reunited with our son, whom she was able to hold in her arms for the first time after so many years. They flew to the United States.
The first time I met my mother, we were at an airport, and we were waiting for my mother, and then she came, and my grandmother was there with me. And then we said goodbye, and we went on the plane to California.
And there I was with a young child that I had to help grow up and with whom I had to share many things. But we had almost nothing in common, really. We were like two strangers.
Yo me entero de la situación de ella aquí en California a través de...
I learned of her situation in California through a letter that entered my cell like a ray of sunlight at noon. The letter had an airmail postmark and a picture of Thomas Jefferson on the stamp. Given the situation, I looked at the picture of this man and thought that this man, with his ideas, would also be considered a subversive in Argentina. The letter told me that my wife was already working for my release and that we might be reunited. Later, in a censored letter, with words crossed out that I couldn't read, by holding the letter up to the light, I was able to make out the words written in English, Amnesty International.
Amnesty International members campaigned and wrote letters appealing for the release of Juan Carlos.
For us to have news from human rights organizations was like a breath of fresh air which entered the prison and renewed our lives. Thanks to the pressure exerted by human rights groups and by the Argentine people, the situation of political prisoners began to improve. And one of the victories achieved was that we were allowed to write to our families and send drawings to our children. We didn't have much to work with. We had to improvise. We used food. For example, carrots to make the color red, herbs to make green. We used pens dipped in water for different shades of blue. I believe the drawings represented a love of life, a reaction to the situation inside. against the gray, the iron, the bars of the prison. We contrasted life and the colors of hope.
One day, after 8 long years, the news arrived. Juan Carlos was free.
Well, the first time I saw my dad was in New York. He came in his plane, and my mother had a sign, so he came to us. He looked kind of funny because I never saw him.
When we finally met, I was uncertain about what would happen. I was terribly nervous. And when they opened the doors of the plane and the passengers got off and I saw him, I didn't know what to do. But in a split second, all my uncertainty about seeing him again vanished. And it was as though we had never been apart.
On his arrival in the United States, Juan Carlos was greeted by the Amnesty members who had worked on his behalf.
They've obviously become very special to us because of the number of people who've invested their lives in them. Some people have been writing letters for 3 years.
So exciting to see Marissa and Juan Carlos and little Patricio together again after so much trouble and travail in their lives, and to feel a little bit of a part of it.
Like Marissa and Juan Carlos, thousands of people are imprisoned for the nonviolent expression of their beliefs. Many are tortured, many are killed. Amnesty International knows that public pressure can mean life and liberty for the victims of government repression.
Déjalo ahí. Mira, ¿quieres subir la nube? Después baja así, pasa el ángel, pum.
A mí me gusta ver los errores más que los aciertos. Mira cómo le erré al piso.
¿Qué?
El piso tiene que haber continuado aquí. Mira dónde está.
Hope is a very big word, but to begin with, we would just like to rebuild our family life.
Mira.
Ahora, este gordito, mira, al medio salió más gordo que los dos orillas. Mira. Aquí bajó de peso.
On the one hand, we should not forget what we have lived through, but we must reconstruct our lives and just be a normal family like any other.
A pesar de todo,
In spite of everything,
yo tenía conciencia, tenía
I
necesidad
wanted to live.
de vivir. La vida es linda,
Life is beautiful.
a pesar de tantas cosas que nos suceden.
In spite of everything that happened,
Del momento histórico que nos tocó vivir.
in spite of the difficult history we in Argentina have had to live through,
La
I
seguridad
was always convinced that sooner, rather than later, we would attain our
vamos a
rights.
conseguir los derechos que necesitamos.
The story of the Rodriguez family has a happy ending. Many don't. To prisoners of conscience and those threatened with torture or execution all over the world, Amnesty International brings the promise of freedom and the bright colors of hope.